great, wonderful. Well, again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone for joining our Digital Technology Applications for Agricultural Water Productivity Improvements webinar today. We have a large number of external partners that are joining, and welcome for joining us today. I'll be brief so we can turn over to our wonderful set of speakers we have. Just briefly though, for 2030 Water Resources Group, we are focused very much on partnerships, SDG 17, how to advance SDG 6, and water security overall, and all the water related targets of the SDGs. 2030 Water Resources Group is based on a foundation of bringing government, private sector, and civil society together through a multi-stakeholder platform approach, particularly to tackle agriculture water issues. And as we know, agriculture accounts for 70% of global water withdrawals. Most of 2030 Water Resource Group countries where we have multi-stakeholder platforms have an agri-water work stream. And really that attests to the importance of tackling these tough issues. Today we're talking around, innovation. So collective action is critical to foster innovation in the water space. We see that through the various disruptive technology applications that 2030 WRG has been able to incubate under our multi-stakeholder platforms. And even this is more relevant today in the COVID-19 scenario, in the situation everyone is dealing with, and the situation again in the years ahead as we tackle the pandemic and the repercussions. 2030 WRG's engagements to drive innovation span a combination of different areas. So pioneering projects and demonstrations, innovative financing, policy and enabling environment reforms, incentives, institutional strengthening, and capacity building. So through the 2030 WRG multi-stakeholder platforms, we bring together all key stakeholders together. So that's public sector, technology companies, incubators, accelerators, investors, startups, academia, and enabling institutions. In the agri-space, producing more with less requires creating a culture of innovation across countries. And so I think that's where we are focusing today. We have a wonderful set of speakers in the webinar to highlight agri-water and disruptive technologies, highlight global cases of disruption in this space. We're going to hear from Wim Bastiansen, who's with ErieWatch, from Zohar Ben Nair, SupPlant, and Paris Bosira, who's with Farm Drive. Apologies that I'm not doing detailed bios for each of the speakers. They bring a wealth of experience and knowledge, but we want to save the time. It would be quite long for each of them, so we're going to save that for the time for the discussion. We also have the honor today of having two discussants who will offer their perspectives on these cases. So that will include Biswachit Datta, who's with Tata Consulting Services, and Harsh Nagaraja, who's with the World Bank Environment GP. And then we'll turn over to a moderated Q&A before closing remarks. So really a wonderful set of speakers. We thank very much again for your time today. A few housekeeping rules before I turn over to our speakers. So please keep your video off and stay muted if you're not speaking. That might help as well to have the background noise limited. Please do post your questions in the chat box. And also please identify if you have a person that you'd like to address the question to. We'll pick those questions up in the Q&A session. Also into the program, we will have a survey that will be shared. Please take note of the link and answer the survey after the webinar. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us improve our future events. Two final things before I turn over. One is the webinar is being recorded. It helps us to be able to record all of the wealth of knowledge shared today and also share with those who may be unable to join today. And finally, as we are using WebEx, sometimes there is a delay when slides are being changed. So apologies on that. Please bear with us and don't drop off. We will be continuing through the program. So now, as I turn over the program, I am turning over first to Rochi Kemka, who's actually part of the 2030 Water Resources Group team. She's Global Partnerships Coordinator and has been leading our work on disruptive technologies and innovation. And she will be sharing more on the activities as we then turn over to hear the speakers and their perspectives, and look forward to also, again, your comments and questions. Please encourage you to share that through the chat box. Rochi, if I can turn over to you, welcome, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thanks, Karen, and a warm welcome to everyone to the webinar. Next slide, please. I'll start off with just talking a little bit about the rationale for advancing disruptive technology innovations in the water sector, and really what motivates us also to work in this space. I think everyone's aware of the growing water challenges. There is a projected water gap of 40% by the year 2030. 4 billion people are already experiencing severe water stress for part of the year. So it's not just something which we're expected to experience in the future, but it's manifesting already today. There are large inefficiencies in water use across various sectors, including agriculture, which, as Karen mentioned, is responsible for 70% of global water withdrawals. And we also see increasing pressures from urbanization, industrialization, and changing lifestyle patterns. Also, a key motivator is that there are 14 SDGs linked to water. So in essence, delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals requires a cross-cutting focus, and this is where technology solutions can play a role. They can help with data collection and analysis, with improved monitoring, with continuous course correction, and also sharing lessons. And another key advantage is that digital solutions allow for a suite of flexible solutions. So we see sort of fungibility across large-scale and decentralized systems. We see the possibility for early detection, for continuous monitoring, and also for driving scale through our work. Next, please. So what really motivated 2030 WRG to engage in this space is that we saw that there were a lot of actors who were active in this. But what was missing was really a cohesive framework for action. And we also saw that there were challenges that were being experienced with respect to procurement, regulation, financing, and that was hindering the impact and scalability of these solutions. So we've had a number of key objectives for engaging, one of which is, of course, promoting productivity gains, but equally reducing water footprints and assigning an economic value to water. This is something that we're promoting across different systems, so agri, urban, and industrial water. And for us, collaboration is key in this space. We really see our multi-stakeholder platform serving as sandboxes where we can incubate and develop solutions. And we bring a host of different stakeholders together, as Karen already alluded to. For us, the space is really about creating a conducive ecosystem for innovation. So that ecosystem can take different shapes and forms. It can be incentives, it can be labeling conditions, it can be regulations. And this is really to embed innovations within institutions. So we are not only looking at one-off solutions and pilots, but how do you disrupt the entire landscape of how water is managed across different stakeholder groups. Next, please. So with respect to agriculture, we've actually mapped the opportunity space, which mirrors the farm-to-fork structure of the agri-value chain. So we're looking at solutions across 4 different stages. The first is at the input stage, where, for example, there are opportunities for crop planning through artificial intelligence decision support systems, as well as on input use efficiency through big data. Then the second step is at the production stage, where we're looking at, for example, early warning systems to protect against climate change, for pest management, and also reducing financial risks for farmers. This comes in through a suite of different fintech and insurance products. Then we move on to the post-harvest stage, where there is financing that we're trying to facilitate for post-harvest credit, and also improve logistics, transport, and storage. And then lastly, the market integration phase, which is really about supporting market linkages for farmers. This also includes risk mitigation. It includes traceability of efficient production, and also mechanisms for price discovery. So ultimately, the aim is to support enhanced income for the farmers across the entire value chain. Next, please. So I'm going to focus now on a few examples of the type of work that we're doing. In South Asia, for example, we're supporting a new market mechanism called wastewater reuse certificates. It's actually a move away from traditional command and control approaches to more innovative economic instruments. So traditionally, we've seen, for example, that you have CapEx financing, which is coming through state budgets, and then you have OpEx financing coming through assess on water use. In this case, it's actually a tradable permit mechanism. So the regulator sets targets for wastewater reuse and then supports trading for wastewater reuse amongst the underachievers and the overachievers of those targets. And the targets are specific to the industries and municipalities based on their baselines. One of the use cases, for example, that we're considering under this is urban to agri reuse, in addition to various other urban and industrial opportunities. Next, please. So there's an underpinning of digital solutions through these certificates. There is IoT meters, where we're looking to capture freshwater intake readings as well as recycling output readings. Then we have blockchain, which we're looking for immutable ledger structures. So this is really for smart contracts as well as the generation and trading of these certificates. And then machine learning for anomaly detection and AI as well. And currently we're exploring double-sided anonymized blind auctions for the actual trading platform. So a suite of different technology solutions, but of course the technology is coming on the back of a very specific type of economic instrument that we want to drive here. Next, please. In India, at the national level, we worked on a blueprint for water accounting, and this was developed under our platform, which was chaired by the Secretary of Water Resources. So it was a multi-stakeholder initiative. And the context was that there were interstate water sharing disputes on one of the key basins in India, which is the Kaveri Basin. And there was lack of data with which the central government could adjudicate. So we actually facilitated the development of water accounts through satellite imagery. And then the water accounts were triangulated with field assessments for the final results. So you see on the slide here some of the estimates that were developed related to evapotranspiration, to the overall water balance for the basin, to land use, land cover, and we collaborated with IHE Delta on this work. And the macro view actually helped to incentivize efficiency in water use. So, giving that perspective of where you have more efficient and less efficient use of water helped to drive decision-making on future allocations as well. And the approach was really to have capacity building of government officials who could then replicate this approach themselves to other basins and states in the country. Next, please. In Mongolia, we've seen that a key issue is around the management of groundwater data. So government data suggests that close to 80% of water is through groundwater. It's also a country where there are heightened social conflicts, particularly around the use of water in mining. So we're developing a groundwater data portal, which helps to collect data from different monitoring borewells and other sources, and then correlates that data through different climatological and economic factors. Then the overlay of digital technology comes in through machine learning for detecting anomalies and also providing early warning systems for any outliers that may exist. And ultimately, we're looking to support predictive analytics through artificial intelligence, which would support allocations and also demand side management in the future. Next, please. This is a snapshot of our work in the state of Maharashtra in India. As you can see, there are various disruptive technology applications that we're driving, one of which is around financing, in particular warehouse receipt financing, which uses blockchain for access to post-harvest credit. So it's really trying to transform value chains through addressing the financing challenge and the use of fintech as well. The second is around a white paper that we're developing on the use of drones in agriculture. This actually traces the sow to harvest cycle in agriculture, and it's particularly focused around climate resilience. This is also very relevant in the current COVID scenario. The third is water accounting through satellite imagery, as well as AI, helping with improved crop and soil health and also water balance analysis. And then the last, which is actually early stages of development, is thinking about how robotics might help with circular economy solutions, including for wastewater reuse. Next, please. In the current scenario of COVID-19, where we're seeing a lot of distortions in the agri-value chain, and that currently actually amplified, our focus has essentially been on enhancing dollars per drop for the farmer in the agri-value chain. And we're trying to see how we can capitalize on this economic value, both at the input stage, at production stage, aggregation, and also at the market linkages stage. And that lost economic value is something that we're assessing through digital technologies to be able to then provide back to the farmers. So it's really an economic recovery initiative through the use of digital technologies. Next, please. And this is my last slide. So just some reflections. There are various different applications, as you might have seen, that we're trying to drive on digital technologies and agri-water. It's important to understand that we have to consider the local context of the challenges that we face. We don't necessarily see digital solutions as a panacea. We see them as enablers. And they definitely don't substitute the need for robust governance. So in a lot of the countries, we find that there's a lack of institutions or a lack of good governance, and we work in tandem on improving the governance as well as providing digital solutions. It does require stakeholder buy-in, and oftentimes the enabling environment and creating that ecosystem for change is quite critical. The good news is that once you've figured out the solution in one context, digital solutions are able to be scaled and replicated, so you can take them elsewhere and you cut down on the transaction costs of replication. Thanks. With that, I turn back to Karen and look forward to the rest of the session.
Great, thank you, Rochi, for sharing so many different examples of what 23 WRG is doing. We're going to turn over now to the case study examples of the program. You all have the agenda. I'm going to start turning over then now first to Dr. Wim Bastiansen to share his perspective on irrigation scheduling and guidance to farmers based on daily satellite images, and then we'll move through the program. So Dr. Bastiansen, please turn over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much for this introduction. Yeah, productivity gains and reduced water footprints is something we all know want. Banks want this, NGOs want this, but also farmers want this. And AreaWatch is an operational system for all the farmers in every country to help them with their daily decisions. Next. So in order to help farmers, we have to quantify the processes. And every field is different. The climate is not the same. The soils are different. So we have to do again and again this quantification. And it starts on the left hand with crop growth. So we have to compute crop the growth from light interception and carbon assimilation and get finally to a yield. This is one pillar. The other pillar is on the hydrology. We have to understand the rain, the irrigation, the evapotranspiration, I call that ET, and we have to bring it together. At the one hand, we want to have more production. On the other hand, we want to have lower water consumption. So in AreaWatch, we quantify all these processes on 10 by 10 meter, and I'm going to give you some examples. But what is very important is to keep in mind what happens with your soil moisture. The soil moisture signature, it really tells you whether things go well or go wrong. And on the right-hand side of this picture, you see an example of soil moisture. So it should stay in the green, then you are good. If you go into the red, it's like you're having stress. So compare it with your bank account. You want your bank account to be in the green. You don't want to become in red. So this helps you every day, farmers, to tell where they are. Are they too wet or too dry? Next. So there are different ways to quantify those processes. And this is just a summary. I'm not going to explain every type of sensor and every device here. I only want to mention that we have a series of different devices available to measure moisture, to measure potential, measure ET, and only a few of them can only say more about crop production, which I think is very important. Every system has its advantages and disadvantages, and also the cost have a wide range from very cheap to very expensive. So it's good to know that all these techniques are out. Next. The next slide here is showing the accuracy. So I found this a very interesting paper from Dr. Rick Allen. He's a global expert in agricultural water management. And he compared, for instance, different technologies to measure the crop water use, our ET, evapotranspiration. And what I highlighted here on this slide in the blue is that lysimeters, they have an error of about 5% if it is managed by an expert. But what is also enlightening is that the remote sensing is the second best estimate of measuring crop ET under field conditions, as long as it is applied by experts. If you go to novices or person that work outside the domain, the errors will go up. Next. So seeing that remote sensing ET has potential and accuracy, I want to now show you how we can use that. And this is an example of a land surface temperature map. It is at the border of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. and it shows the temperature in Kelvin. So the blue pixels have 25 degrees. They are all cold. But the red pixels, they are in the 35-degree range. So you can see an enormous differences in temperature. And all the fields that are very dark blue, they just are very wet. They just had water. Okay? So we can really see how much moisture is there and which fields are using how much water. And the nice thing is this image is from the 2nd of September. But we have these images every day. So we can also look on the next day and the next day. So we can really start monitoring what is happening with irrigated field and see whether they have a high or low water productivity. Next. So this is an example from Punjab. And these are small fields. There are potato fields, half a hectare or 1 hectare. And even in October, this is 2nd of October, this temperature map shows already a big range of temperatures. You know, it goes really from, let's say, an approximately 30 degrees to 40 degrees. So you can see huge difference of 10 degrees and more, even within small fields. You can see here every pixel. Every pixel is 10 by 10 meters, which, by the way, is also the beauty of this. You can really measure what is happening inside your field. Next. So, as I mentioned, the temperature is related to moisture. A colder soil will have more moisture. Now, if we repeat all this analysis day after day after day after day, you can really make a time series. And here you can see 6 fields from all over the world. And the one, for instance, in the center part on the left hand is having very high moisture. So there is an over-irrigation. We look at the lower one on the right-hand side, you see it's just perfect. It is a little bit red, a little bit under irrigation, but it's good. Whereas on the left-hand side at the bottom, you see it's too much deficit irrigation. So it's not so easy. You know, you cannot expect from farmers by looking over their fields to make judgments on how much water should I apply today. Next. So they need assistance. They need a daily assistance. Here's an example from Tamil Nadu on coconuts. So IRRIWatch is here also calculating the water use, the amount of water they apply, and also coconut production. And here in the very dark blue, you see all the parts of the plantation that have a very high water productivity, but also you can see in yellow the places that have a low water productivity. So even within a single field or single plantation, we see differences. And we have to help the growers to understand this and to improve this. Next. This is another example from Africa. So this is southern Egypt, is Toshka, and here they have very modern irrigation systems. They have these center pivots. That's why we have here the circles. And the left-hand picture shows this water productivity of alfalfa, which is a forage grass, and it is having a lot of spatial variability again. So it's an example. It's an example of high-value technologies, but you still see a lot of things that can be improved. So we get soil moisture, we get ET, and crop production. Next. So we can get this information, but we have to help the farmer. And this is an example from South America. Yeah? So here the farmer can see on a smartphone in red that these fields need water today. And he can also see how much water today, the minimum amount of water to be applied. Yeah? Some of them 6 millimeters, some of them 8 millimeters. Yeah? So IRRIWatch is giving an operational system to farmers to make a decision on how much water they should irrigate. So my next slide and final slide will be on a few conclusions. So we have to measure the entire system. We have to measure the crop production system, but also the water cycle. How much we apply, how much water is consumed. We can do this 10 by 10 meters, which is very good. It's always good to have local measurements in the field. And I'm very glad the next speaker will speak about field measurements. But at the same time, we have to realize that a local field measurements is not always giving a complete picture. I gave you now several examples that there is within field variability. So really, in the end, it is about, okay, how much water should I irrigate today, and how much is my water productivity? And with this, I would like to conclude and give it back to Karen. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Bastiansen. Thank you for sharing that incredible information in terms of how you can translate for farmers on the ground to get information and use that in their own processes. Let's turn over now to Mr. Zohar Ben-Nur, who will take us in terms of looking precision agriculture and cloud computing as we look forward in terms of different innovations in this space. Mr. Ben-Nur, I know you have trouble with video, but we can hear you, so let's proceed.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne, and good day for everybody. Since 5 years, SupPlant company is implementing technology that is using plant sensors and unique algorithms to control autonomously the irrigation. We collected already 1,500 years of data from more than 40 crops over the world. The outcome is astonishing and provide new ways to understand precise irrigation. Next slide, please. Next, please. We have managed to understand that, number one, time of irrigation is the most important factor in stress prevention, and the resolution is ours. So making the irrigation a bit too late already applies on the plant and reduce productivity. Using smart irrigation, we can also prepare the plant for extreme conditions such as drought that becomes more and more common. Okay, you're already in the next slide. And practically, the system is built of sensors. The sensors are dendrometers that measures the daily expansion and contraction of stem and trunk. This is a micrometers. We are measuring also soil moisture and salinity. We are also measuring climate and taking into consideration weather forecast. All of this information is sent to the cloud where the algorithms are digesting the informations and moving on with the technology. Next, please. SupPlant studied for a long time the correlation between weather and soil, trunk, fruit behavior. This data creates the foundation for our powerful all capabilities and algorithms. Next. Practically, we do have a system that results action, and it is working this way. The information comes from the plants. It takes data every 10 minutes, send it to the cloud. The information is processed in the cloud and go two-directional. One direction is to the farmer, a cell phone or handheld device where he can see alerts, notifications, and understand what is going on in real time. The other direction is connecting directly to the farmer valve or irrigation controller. We do have where we do work with most of the common irrigation controllers worldwide, and then it initiates irrigations in accordance with the real need, and vice versa. So it's a closed loop where the plant actually defines the proper manner for the irrigation scheduling. Next. For example, this data derived from lemon trees in South Africa. We can see the blue line stands for the trunk daily contraction and growth. You can see the first half of the season using the farmer regime, and you can see the green line for the soil moisture. You can, and then practically the growth rate was reduced due to too late irrigations. While changing to the technology, we can see that the system decides to work more, to go more frequently with higher moisture and boost and push the growth rate twice, reduce the daily contraction in a way that finally produce better yield and reduce water use. Next. The technology also enables providing means of protecting the crop by scheduling the irrigation in a way that it prevents damage using weather forecasts. Next. For example, this is an event from Australia last year, extreme drought, temperature was exceeded 45 degrees centigrade, while humidity was lower than 20%, vapor pressure deficit of 7 to 9, where normal VPDs is 3 to 4. Next, please. The system decided, and we can see the green line, to irrigate more frequently, while the farmer exceeded with his own irrigation regime of irrigating once a week different quantities. Next, please. And the outcome is that the plants irrigated by the technology was not affected at all from the drought. You can see the growth maintained, the daily contraction was normal, while the ones that were irrigated once a week, the daily contraction was extreme, means very high stress, and there was negative growth. Normally, this is affecting production, specifically when it happens during the flowering or fruit sets period, that can actually reduce production by 50 to 80%. And this kind of measures taken can reduce it or prevent it fully. Next, please. The company provides two types of services. One type is a decision support system, where the farmer gets 1 week in advance irrigation plan with the timing and quantities, which is updated once a day if there is any need, and the farmer gets notification when it needs to change his regime. And also the autonomous technology, growth-based irrigation, where practically it irrigates according to the plant demand, and also provides more in-depth information in real time. Next. The system is supported with robust user interface, both for handheld devices and PCs. This is these units are updated once and every half an hour, so the farmer is getting real-time information and alerts if required, and if needed, he can always get into the system and see what is the current status of, let's say, fruit size, fruit growth, or whatever he is looking for, beside things that has to do with irrigation scheduling and irrigation regimes. And finally, next please. And finally, the results. We have hundreds of installations worldwide, dozens of different crops, and most of them we achieve higher yield using less water. So for example, you can see that diverse types of crops, in most cases, 10% yield increase using 10% less water. So water use efficiency is significant achievement that we have made using this type of practice technology. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bender. That was very interesting to get information in the hands of farmers. We have one more presenter, which is Paris, who will share also approaches in terms of risk reduction and analytical support for farmers. So Paris, if I could turn over to you, and then we'll turn over to our discussants. Thank you very much. We see more questions coming in through the chat. I encourage everyone to keep doing that. And Paris, we look forward to hearing your comments and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Paris, and I'm based in Nairobi. I'm presenting from Nairobi today. The work that we do is in advancing agriculture, finance, and food systems using technology. Next slide, please. Yeah. So in summary, FarmDrive is a financial technology company, and we apply data science to build technology solutions that increase access to meaningful financial services for smallholder farmers. Our main mission is to drive more private capital to underserved client segments, and most of the underserved client segments live in the rural areas in Kenya, and most of them are smallholder farmers. Over the last 5 years, our work has mainly been focused on not only financing the farmers directly, but also building tools to enable more financial institutions in Kenya to scale their agriculture portfolios, not just in Kenya, but across Africa. Over the last 2 years, based on the efforts and the work and the lessons from the first 3 years of our work, we've managed to unlock about slightly over $10 million to date to smallholder farmers and value chain players, the SMEs that work in the agriculture sector in Kenya through partnerships with the financial service providers. The core of how our work is structured is that we build data-driven technology solutions, and then we present this as back-end infrastructure to the lenders. And some of the lenders that we have in Kenya range from the big formal banks, we have the microfinance institutions, we have the NGOs that operate in the sector, we have the digital financial service providers, and some of them work in collaboration with telecommunication companies. So we are able to provide data services, backend technology infrastructure that integrates with the different players so that we can get more agriculture portfolios going to the smallholder farmers from the different banks. So we are not necessarily in competition with the banks. We are an enabler, helping more banks, more lenders to get more money out to the smallholder farmers. In the next slide, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk through what that technology looks like and how it works to get the money to the smallholder farmers. One very important statistic that actually drives our work and our mission and that we keep in mind every day is the fact that across Africa, less than 1%, and these are statistics both from studies done, I think there's some studies done by the World Bank, there's a lot of studies done by the Kenya Bankers Association. Across Africa, less than 1% of commercial lending goes to the agriculture sector, yet it's the biggest contributor to the economies of most sub-Saharan countries. In Kenya particularly, it's the range is about 3.5 to 4%, and it's been like that for the last 15 years. Of the total commercial lending that goes to agriculture, it's only 4% that's allocated to that sector, and most of that actually goes to the larger scale farmers, the larger scale enterprises. So it's a very, very minimal percent that goes to smallholder farmers. Why is this the case? Some of the obvious reasons are the fact that smallholder farmers have a very unique risk profile from all credit beneficiaries in the banking sector. And that unique risk profile is largely attributed to the fact that smallholder farmers have seasonal cash flows. And that originates from the fact that a lot of the smallholder farmers in Kenya and across Africa actually rely on rain-fed agriculture, which ties to the conversation that we are having today. They rely on rain-fed agriculture. In Kenya, for example, we only have 2 rain seasons. So if farmers are only able to farm either for one season or at the very best those two seasons, they don't have consistent cash flows through the year. So it's very hard to structure loan products for this sector. Some of the other factors include real risks like climate change, the fact that a lot of our land, especially in the country like Kenya, 80% of our land is actually arid and semi-arid. So there's not a lot of water to ensure productivity, continuous productivity through the seasons, and to also ensure that we have efficient productivity without using a lot of money. And the other major factor is the fact that a lot of farmers don't have collateral that banks consider. Let me call it bank. Let me use a common term, bankable. They don't have assets that financial institutions consider as collateral for the risk of loans. It's for this reason that lending gap is still there. And the work that we do at FarmDrive is to be able to quantify that risk premium. What's the risk of default for this sector that has a very unique risk profile? And how do you design loan products that work for this sector? A lot of the work that we've done, especially in the last 3 years, has been really working with different financial institutions and bringing together their historical loan data sets, the loan records, the loans that they've given out to different farmers, putting all that in a warehouse and starting to find common patterns. And using those common patterns, then we are able to gather insights and start advising. We think that to lend to this particular sector, let's say the maize value chain, this is how we should design the loan products for this particular part of Kenya based on different patterns, let's say the rain patterns. Here is how you start by designing the loan products. Here is how you should structure the repayments for that loan product, and here is the best way to recover. On top of that, using the data patterns, we are able to identify who are the other players in the market that are going to come in and de-risk this loan that's going out to the farmers. And
1 minute.
From a lot of the work that we've done, we've found that agriculture loans perform better, or they're very optimal when you link in training, when there's information and when there's access to market and there's insurance because of the real risks of climate change. A lot of the products that we are now supporting financial institutions to put out are actually linked in that way. We have a market access component because once you bring in finance, it's easier for traders or buyers to start feeling comfortable that they are assured, they are guaranteed of productivity, they're guaranteed of efficient and consistent production. Once you have a financing component, it's easier for the supplier market to start engaging, bringing in the quality inputs, bringing in some of the equipment that's required for, let's say, drip irrigation. So it starts unlocking the entire market and further reduces the risk. Our farm drive stack is divided into 5 modules, and financial institutions, when they talk to us, they choose which stack they want. So the first part that reduces cost significantly is the distribution aspect. We've been able to help financial institutions to bring on digital onboarding infrastructure because a lot of the farmers already have mobile phones, they have USSD, they have SMS, some of them even have WhatsApp. So being able to create onboarding experiences on mobile phones so that financial institutions don't have a lot of agents and a lot of labor on the ground to onboard the farmers, and also capturing important onboarding data like who are these clients, where are they located, because that data is very important in correlating with the patterns that are significant in determining risk. And then a key piece of our work, of course, is the credit scoring and credit decisioning work, which has been made possible because of the amount of historical data that we've collected over the last 5 years. And using that data, then we are able to build predictive models because we have both training data sets, we have the test data sets, and we are able to pick out the patterns to train algorithms. We have a very huge data warehouse that contains this both this historical data. We have agronomically.
I'm sorry to
relevant.
to wrap up if that's okay. I know there's so much information to share here, but if you don't mind, just 1 more second, please, and then
I'm wrapping up. Yeah, I'm wrapping up on the data warehousing. So the data warehouse is what feeds into a lot of the work that we do, including the scoring engines. It has this historical data that we keep feeding into the warehouse. We have data like satellite imagery, some of it that we've gotten through World Bank support, a lot of it from agents like the European Space Agency, and agronomically relevant data from the different countries like soil moisture. We have the water levels, the weather patterns. So we've created this infrastructure of data that feeds to the different players, and we're able to make it cost effective for different banks, to financial institutions and lenders to give loans to smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paris. Thank you. Just a wealth of information there, and apologies to cut you off. I do want to thank our 3 speakers. I think, very interesting points, especially as we've had this digital revolution globally, and it's important to think how to make sure that small farm holders and farm holders in general are not left behind. So thank you very much for sharing this. perspectives and also the different technologies and financing options that are out there. I do want to turn over to, we have two discussants who will, in essence, provide some reactions to our three speakers. So Mr. Biswachi Datta will be first, and we look forward to hearing your perspectives on the case studies that have been shared here today. Mr. Datta, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all my water-wise friends. Thanks for three excellent case studies and the experience that speakers have brought in. And I particularly believe in technology can solve any challenge. But what is required of three things which we have been giving or enforcing in both all the three discussions. One is the right governance. Act from the local authorities to the recipients, which is a farming community, and the policy makers. So unless we have a cohesive governance structure inside that framework, no technology can change or benefit or create value. Second part is the participatory water accounting. So everybody understands the grave situation that we are in most of the countries in terms of the water scarcity. But how can we optimize and advise the farmer community based on the macro information, whether it is satellite imagery or it is the groundwater sources information and the crop characteristics, and how do we advise the nuances of that community is again a critical factor. And third thing is how can we make it better rather than giving a solution, making it static and whether it's working or not working, how we can make continuous course correction with continuous innovation. That is the culture that how we can embed. And it is coming out very well in different scenarios, starting from the crop selection, changing the pattern of the whole course of the crop development, and how we can monitor different economic and climate parameter in order to give the right advice. So that's my takeaway from these three case studies. I want to present two stories from TCS, how we have been helping the farmers community in different contexts. First use case is from my own India, and we all know India has 18% of global population, but we only have 4% of the fresh water, and that 80% of that fresh water consumed by agriculture. So there is always a fight between the supply and demand, and there was a lot of initiative on the water budgeting, water accounting systems, and different technologies coming in. But when we took the problem statement, the core issue that we have found that technology is there, but it is not effectively being used to deliver the value to the end consumer, which is our farmers. So how we can make it participatory? So we selected 3 villages in the state of Maharashtra, near Nashik district, and had a lot of workshop to understand where is the core problem. And we found out different characteristics. So one is pre-monsoon and post-monsoon, there is enormous change of the characteristics of the soil, the moisture content, the water availability, and the kind of the feel-good factor of the farmers because there is a lot of water or there is no water. So how can we take those data and information and simulate the what-if scenarios in order to change the crop pattern and advise the farmers how to save water, use recycled water, and select the right crop at the right time of the year so that it uses the optimum amount of water and it gives enough water to run their farming and their livelihood. So that was one in India. And second one is in Australia, in the New South Wales, where the Water New South Wales is the custodian of water resources. And the classic problem that they had is the customer satisfaction index from the farmer community was at the lowest level. While the domestic consumer who have the same water from their dams and reservoir having the good amount of customer satisfaction. So we understood that the voice of the farmers in terms of their priorities and when they want water and how transparent are we in order to give them the availability, quantity, and the quality of water information was a challenge. So we used the drone technology, the satellite imagery, and the big data platform analytics in order to give the transparent, right information to the right farmer community at the right time, so that they effectively use their water for the the good value of farming of foods. These are two case studies I wanted to present. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Biswajit. Thank you very much also for your points on the importance of uptake and participation. If I can turn now over to Harsh to get your reflections on what the speakers presented and your thoughts on what's been shared.
Karen, and thank you for the invite for this excellent session where I think we all got a lot of food for thought in terms of a lot of the uses of different types of disruptive tech. So as a global lead, that used to be my old title on Watersheds. I'm now a global lead for disruptive technology at the environment practice, and also I'm co-leading our hydroinformatics work globally. And as we know, one of the big challenges is to see how we can take advantage of this new world which is emerging in terms of new technologies to help provide services, especially for the poor, right? And this is where one of the things we've tried to do is to look at what kinds of disruptive technologies there might be out there. So we've been looking at things that in three different categories. One is disruptions to the way of the data value chain in terms of going from data to decisions, new ways of collecting data, as we've seen from Earth observation, from in situ sensors, crowdsourcing, and so on, new ways of analyzing these and making these more accessible, as well as disrupting the way we make things, for example, to make much lower cost monitoring systems for looking at, say, using 3D printing for observing rainfall or observing water levels and so on to disrupt the cost structure over there, or using new automation or other technologies. And the third is tools like this, where we look at disrupting the way in which we interact with different stakeholders, whether it be through these kind of virtual learning systems or mobile money or crowdsourcing ideas or sharing economy and so on. So all of these elements which we saw in today's presentations, I think it was good to see the context which you and Rochi put together. And I think we should have some multi-stakeholder platform meetings in the bank itself, because there's probably a lot of learning that can happen within the bank in terms of the kinds of things that are emerging using a lot of these new technologies. Wim, it's always a pleasure to see the father of evapotranspiration estimation from remote sensing, also looking at these more exciting services that can be now done in terms of water accounting at a farm level, which can be looked at in different ways. We'll come back to that in a second. And then to go from Earth observation to something that Zohar was mentioning in terms of using these IoT type systems, where you're looking at more bottom-up in situ sensors to add to this mix. And it was a nice rounding off, I think, with Perez presenting how some of these may not be in all the glory of Earth observation and IoT, but systems could be developed for stakeholder platforms, more along the third line of disruption that we were talking about, to try and get farmers network to use a lot of these new systems in new ways. And also great to see some of the comments that Biswajit made in terms of some of these emerging pilots that are happening. The one major point that I'd like to focus on is to see how we can go beyond piloting some of these in different locations to see how we can do these at scale. And more important, to try and see how we can make these work for the poor, because it's always going to be the case that the richer farmers can afford a lot of these kind of systems as they're evolving. But how do we make the poor farmers and the shareholders and the smallholders benefit from these kinds of systems and break through the really emerging digital divide that we see? And this is where we can probably find new ways to leverage a lot of these both free services as well as subscription type services that are emerging in these systems, and also new ways of linking up with the connectivity. I think as some of the comments were saying, can we think about farmers organizations or water user associations or others being able to leverage these kinds of systems for their work? And also to see how we all can play a role in terms of facilitating support. For example, can there be investments made in terms of the 3 I's, the information institutions, and investments to help support these monitoring systems or cloud infrastructure to help pull a lot of the data together and make it accessible through APIs and services and so on, which could be critical for
1 minute.
Thanks. Yeah, for helping everyone calibrate, validate, and even to do training on machine learning systems and so on, and improve the governance overall, as well as helping with institutional systems for improving knowledge and learning, as well as to try and improve professional networking and working with academia, students, and others. And the main thing is to also think about how to work with startups better, because that's something we haven't quite got into. But I think you'll need a lot of these kind of things to come together to help provide free or low-cost services finally to the farmers, because otherwise we'll be stuck at pilots here and there. And that's the challenge. I think in the age of drones, we shouldn't be thinking about pilots anymore. So we should try and find ways of scaling a lot of these things up in ways in which everybody can benefit from it. So great to hear everyone, and keep disrupting.
Great, thank you, Harsh. I love that. Keep disrupting. Thank you for all of the points. Thank you to our 3 speakers and our 2 discussants. There was a lot of rich information shared here. I think before I turn over to the Q&A session, we've already had a number of questions come in through the chat, and we have Mahesh from our team. He's a senior advisor on disruptive technology, Mahesh Patankar, who will be leading us through this Q&A session. But I think the key point here, a couple of key points. One is around this that it doesn't replace good governance. Everything that we're doing around innovation and disruptive technologies is a value added to push in the direction of good governance. And this question of scaling, certainly it's something as 2030 Water Resources Group, we're looking at how we can have the multi-stakeholder platforms really leverage and scale. Certainly our hosting by the World Bank, which we're really excited about, and thinking how we can drive innovation in new ways at scale. It's a very, very good point, Harsh. So let me turn over. We do have time for Q&A. I've seen a lot coming in. So Mahesh, if I can turn over to you to really hopefully capture what's been going on in the chat, and also maybe other points that have been coming through, and have our speakers be able to respond.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Karine.
Mahesh is breaking up, so I don't know if you want to maybe go off screen. Apologies, and maybe that'll help.
Sure. So I hope this is better.
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah, great. Yeah. So we have sort of several questions, and first thing that I would like to do is I would like to thank the speakers. I think we have seen several best kept secrets in the disruptive technology applications, and looks like we have been able to sort of take some of those out of the box, and then we have had very interesting discussion from across the globe. So there are specific questions to the speakers, and what I would do is I would like to take these questions in 3 different silos. One is related to the costing part of it, other related to the data part of it, and the third one, as Karen rightly mentioned, the scale part of it. So let me start with the scale part of it. I think it's important for us to sort of, there are a few questions related to, was the application of the disruptive technologies driven at the farm level, or were there any implications at the basin level? And this specific question came up to Zohar Winner. So Zohar, would you like to take this question to begin with, and then I'll turn to the panelists?
Yes, sure. The application that we have developed is aiming for the farm level, and we are working with large farms, thousands of hectares, hundreds of hectares. But we do develop now, together with the GEO of India, technology that will use this practice to develop better and more accurate crop coefficient. We call it dynamic crop coefficient, meaning that we are using the technology on small scale in a region, and we are taking the data and implementing it with the very small farmers using application where they get the information through the application, through the smartphones, and that will enable us to extend the technology to the tens of thousands and millions, and that is where we are aiming at this point of time.
Great. Thanks a lot, Bender. Then I would like to now pose the same question to Professor Wim Bastensen, who is actually using satellite imagery to get data on ET and everything that you can do in terms of improved water use efficiency at the farm level. So Wim, would you like to sort of talk about what are the challenges and imperatives to use the data which could be used at the basin level and even perhaps a larger geoclimatic region? Wim, please.
Renewable water resources, so they know how much water they have available for instance, the irrigation sector. So that part is already solved, sometimes from water accounting, sometimes from other studies, but they know the total amount of water available. But they have the challenge, like, okay, but now how are we going to distribute that? You know, so what I like about this is that the basin approach comes in from the start. Well, not in the end, but it comes in from the start. Like we only have a certain amount of water. And as was mentioned by I think RG'S, that there are farmers that are much more efficient with water than others. So then this discussion comes, like, but who is getting that little water? It is sometimes very clear that certain river basins have to cut back on their available water resources, either climate change or over-exploitation from the recent past. All good reasons to reduce. But again, you have to help to make a plan on a field by field basis. And what we do in AreaWatch is we calculate then the total amount available, and then we develop together with the water district allocations. Okay. And a farmer will get an allocation line, like, okay, on this plot, I can use so much cubic meter water per year or per season. And then by having these daily images, we can then really check out and track on how far they are away from that target, you see? And so it's not only from the bottom up that you want to save water, but it's also from the top down. And I think yeah, then the need of a scalable technology comes in, and that was one of the other questions, because yeah, what is the good thing of remote sensing, and that is what I have been doing for 30 years, so I'm a firm believer, is that it's scalable. We measure every 10 meters, so every field in the world. It's operational. We don't need another platform or group or a long discussion. What I really like today is also with the presentation of SupPlant is we already reach out to farmers. We're already active in 25 countries. It's not like something far away. No, it's something that is already happening. And I think the banks and the donors, they should really hook onto this, So that's scalable. Remote sensing is scalable. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Wim. I think it's absolutely sort of interesting to note that the entire satellite-based imagery system that you have developed deals with the skill problem immediately. I also would like to pose a similar question to Paris. And one of the panelists, one of the participants put it very interestingly, that looks like we are putting the data and the finance in the hands of the farmers to whom it matters the most. So one question, Paris, that has come up is there are investment opportunities, there are water use efficiency opportunities that are available to the farmers. So when you are looking at financial disruptions, how are you dealing with one smallholder farmer and a large water basin level interventions. So can you please reflect on how are you dealing with the scale opportunities here?
So a lot of the areas where data really helps in making lending to farmers cost efficient is the ability to know where the farmers are located and being able to put them in groups. And that helps with the issues of scale. When you're able to use data to lump up the farmers and know where the farmers in, let's say the farmers in the western parts of Kenya, where is the farming land, where most of the farmers concentrated, and what are they farming? That helps you to analyze and determine what kind of loan products, if it's, let's say, loan products for water efficiency use, if it's loan products for drip irrigation or let's say insurance, you're able to bundle and design those products based on that area. So we use a lot of data to actually customize the products based on the location. And how we know that, it's because of the data that we use. So we're not getting the financial institutions to lend blindly. They know where the farmers are located.
Okay, thank you, Paris. Now let's move to the data part of the questions and the comments that we have received. So let me start with you, Paris. There was a specific question related to how are you securing the information that you're getting at the farm level. So, and this is actually coming up even in other countries where we are trying to work, where the data sovereignty is of a great importance. So, Paris, can you please talk about the data security aspect?
Yes. So one of the big responsibilities that we have is the fact that we now have access to a lot of very personal data that we get from different institutions, and very unique data from the ground that we get on these institutions. So one of the ways that we secure the data that we get is making sure that we have very tight security controls and data controls around who gets access to the data that we have. We anonymize most of the data that we use to build the models, and the financial institutions deal with their customers at their own level. So the financial institutions are the customer-facing elements. They have their own data protection and data security rules, also because of the ability to use digital data collection. If you're using self-registration tools, then the data is coming directly to a server. You're able to secure that and anonymize. And our ability to centralize, let me call it, create a central repository of anonymized data that then becomes valuable to everyone, makes the security aspects even better, because 10 financial institutions then don't need to have access to each and every piece of personal data. We are able to provide that security layer for them.
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Paris. Now we have only a few minutes left in the Q&A session, but I would like to take the data question to Wim. And if you could talk in like 30, 40 seconds, are you facing any problems and challenges in getting the satellite imagery data? And when we worked in India, we did face this problem to get the data from remote sensing labs and so on. So any reflection on how you're getting data, how you're getting permissions in the first place to get this data?
No, there are now many FTP sites operational, and we have now these API technologies that automatically you can download the data. Most data we had 3 hours after observation in-house, except some data from one particular satellite is always a bit late. But usually in 3 hours we have the data in the house, which means we can process, and then 1 hour later we can send the app to the farmer, and that is data secure. The farmer only gets his own data, his own fields, and the consequence is that he or she should say what are the digital boundaries. So we have to help them by saying this is your field, and then they only get the information of that one field, not of the neighbor, not at all. So sometimes the governments they also want to have this data. Now, if they pay, if the government And I also have governance from developing countries that are paying for this data. Then also we give a copy to the government so that they can make better water allocation plans. But that is an exception. Mostly it's only directly with the farmer only have his own information.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Wim. We have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to take one more question at this stage. And we are capturing all these questions and we'll come back to the participants after this webinar is over with a few more answers to these questions, interacting with the panelists. So this last question is to Zur. There is a desire to understand the cost of technology and the cost of equipment that you're putting into the farms. So any reflections on the costing part of it related to your solutions?
We provide it as a service, so it varies between $50 to $150 per hectare for the large farmers. Utilizing the data for initializing irrigation with no hardware at the site, we're talking a small amount of money. We're talking $5 a season, or this kind of cost that is involved. This is more or less the scope in this respect. In most cases, we are achieving increasing productivity that raises to even sometimes 50%, but normally it is between 5 to 15%. So $50 to $150 an hectare is not a big investment to make in such conditions.
All right. Okay, thanks a lot, Zur. So thank you, panelists, for this interesting Q&A session. I'm now going to turn it back to Karin for the final session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mahesh, and thank you very much to Wim Zohar Paris for tackling these questions. There are many, many more, as Mahesh mentioned, and we can come back. We can save those and come back to our speakers. Also, again, thank you to Biswajit and to Harsh in terms of your, as discussants as well, sharing your perspectives. I'm sure there's also discussion coming in back to hear more from you as well. So apologies, we're near at the end of the closing of the webinar. I do want to turn it over to Joy Busolo, who's a Senior Water Resource Management Specialist working with 2030 Water Resources Group in Africa. I do also encourage all of you, there is in the chat box a link to fill out a survey. Again, please do take a moment to do that. It helps us with future sessions, and we appreciate your perspective. If I can turn over to you, Joy, to just close us out. And again, thank you to everyone, especially those who helped organize the session today. Personally from me, I know it takes quite a bit, so very much thank you. Joy, if I can turn over to you to help close us out very briefly.
Thank you to all our participants for a very productive session and also for joining us today. I also want to thank all the speakers for a very productive session. I think in 2 minutes, I'd just like to share 3 key messages. I think it's more important now than ever on the role of disruptive technology in the water space, especially in the face of all the challenges that we are facing in water security and also in climate change. The second message I'd like to share is just the powerful role that digital technology is able to play in the space of water for agriculture. I think today, from the different examples that have been shared and also the different applications, we've seen the role of digital technology in very many facets, from access to finance, crop productivity, crop protection. And so there's never been a better time than now to see how to mainstream these applications in all our solutions going forward. I like the message from Rochi, and also in addition to what Biswat said about digital technology not being a magic bullet and also not being able to replace good governance, but it's important that to understand that it also requires good governance for it to be effective. And so going forward, Harsh threw a challenge to us in terms of how do we move to scale and how do we make this more inclusive so that we're not only focusing on the more enabled farmers, but also the small scale poorer farmers. I think through creating an enabling ecosystem that brings collective action and also participatory solutions, we'll be able to achieve this. We need to bring government together with private sector, technology companies, incubators, accelerators, as well as startups. I think startups came out very strongly in the discussions today. So when we bring all the stakeholders together, the able to create enabling solutions that can move us forward. So thank you very much for this productive session. Look out for a second series of the same in the coming near future. And if you want to reach out to any of us within 2030 WRG for more discussions, myself and Rochi will lead this work from our team. So we are happy to engage with you going forward. Back to you, Karin, and thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Joy. A very big thanks to everyone, our speakers, our discussants today, and especially our participants who joined today. Thank you for all of your questions. As Joy mentioned, we will have another session. Please do take out the survey to complete that. Help give us feedback as we move forward, and definitely reach out to us as we work together to tackle these issues. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to connecting with you before long. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.